Today we'll be talking about quadratic equations, which is different units for different classes, but for our Algebra 1 class, that's Unit 3, and in our Geometry class, that's Unit 5. Our lesson today, we're going to talk about the quadratic formula, and our goal is going to be to be able to use the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations. Now, if you think back to quadratic equations, you have already seen stuff that looks like this. X squared equals 25, where that's very simple. All you do is take the square root of both sides and you get plus or minus 5. Today we're going to be looking at a little more complicated situation when you see something like this. Alright, first things first. Can't solve for x right now because we have a y. But when we talk about solving an equation, we're talking about finding the x-intercept. When we talk about the x-intercept, the y value is always 0. So I can plug 0 in for that y, and now I'll have 2x squared minus 6x minus 8 equals 0. That's essential. We cannot solve if we have both variables here. We have to only have one variable. So plug your 0 in for your y. Thank you, Brandon Curry. Thank you. Now, from there, we're going to identify standard form, which you have done a lot at this point. It may not have been spelled out to you, but standard form is this right here. Y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. This is what we call standard form. This is a formula just like y equals mx plus b or anything else. So standard form here is just telling us that we are in the order of decreasing exponents. So our x squared term comes first, our x term with just an understood 1 comes next, and our constant is last. So we are in standard form. Now this is useful for finding our a, our b, and our c. So notice there's a coefficient in front of the x squared, in front of the x, and then there's a constant out here. So a, in this case, is going to be 2, so we're identifying a, b, and c. B is going to be negative 6, and c is going to be negative 8. Now that is useful for our quadratic formula. The quadratic formula you do not have to memorize. It is given to you. It's in the formula sheets. It's on the board in the classroom. And it'll be on the formula sheets in the test. But the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So after we identify a, b, and c, and look at our quadratic formula, you should see why I identified a, b, and c. Now I'm going to plug them in. So identify a, b, and c, and then plug them in. So we'll have negative b. Remember, the negative sign means the opposite. So the opposite of b, the opposite of negative 6 is 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Negative 6 times negative 6 is what I mean there. So put it in parentheses, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 8. Notice I've just substituted for a, b, and c, all over 2 times a, which is 2. From here, I'm just going to simplify. This is a part that some students don't like, but really it's not so bad, particularly if you use your calculator. So let's start with this term. Negative 6 squared is 36. Let's move to this one. We have a negative times a positive times a negative. That's two negatives. They'll cancel out, and we'll have a plus. By cancel out, I mean a negative times a negative is a positive. 4 times 2 is 8, times 8 is 64. If you didn't remember that off the top of your head, you could always punch that in a calculator. All over 4. So let's bring it down again. 6 plus or minus the square root of 100 over 4. And I just combine 36 and 64. Now, what's the square root of 100? It's 10. So I'd have 6 plus or minus 10 over 4. Now, that plus or minus is a little bit weird to some of you. Some of you have not done that before. Now, remember when we did this, we solved it by taking the square root, and we got plus or minus 5. So we're doing the same thing here. We're taking the plus or minus because we're taking a square root. Remember, positive 10 times positive 10 is 100, and negative 10 times negative 10 is 100. So you had two answers. Well, here, this is just a shortcut way of writing two answers. So we're going to write this out two ways. 6 plus 10 over 4 and 6 minus 10 over 4. Notice that plus went to there and that minus went to there. That's why I have two problems. So 6 plus 10 is 16 over 4 is 4. 6 minus 10 is negative 4 over 4, which is negative 1. So there are my two answers. Remember back here we had two answers? Same idea here. We'll have two answers. So our x-intercepts on this problem are 4, 0, and -1, 0. So those are the x-intercepts to this problem. So a few things here to write down in your notes. Make sure you have the quadratic formula, which is this right here. Make sure that you can identify A, B, and C using standard form. Make sure that y is 0. Last, make sure that you can simplify. Now let's look back at simplifying a second. It looks like a mess because it's a lot of steps, but y'all can take this part, the square root here, type that in the calculator, and it will give you 10. And then you can just go 6 plus or minus 10 over 4. So with the calculator, you can skip all the way down to there. So that may make it way easier on you. So let's look at some steps real quick to make sure that we know what we're doing. Number 1, identify A, B, and C. Number 2, write the quadratic formula. More times you write it, the more familiar you'll get. Number 3, substitute for A, B, and C. And remember, by substitute, I really mean plug it in. You've got all three of them, plug them in. Step 4 is just to simplify. So, not so bad when you think about it that way. The tricky part is simplifying, but y'all can do that with a little patience and a little perseverance.